What's up, binge watchers? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I'll be doing a non-spoiler review of part 2 of Lupin, created by George K. and François Uzan. All 5 episodes are now available to stream on Netflix. I will be mentioning spoilers from part 1, so if you haven't seen the show yet, I urge you guys to go check my part 1 non-spoiler review. I'll be putting down the link on the description below. Chances are you already saw the show because if the statistics are to be believed, this is the most watched non-English language on Netflix. Anyway, to give you guys a run-through of what the show is about, basically, Lupin does not appear in the show. He still remains to be a fictional character. He is an inspiration, however, for our main character here, who is Assane Diop, played by Omar Sy, an immigrant from Senegal who performs this heist in order to avenge his father, who was wrongly accused of theft and eventually leading to his death. Now, he wants to make sure that those people who are responsible to the downfall of his father will be brought to justice in his own brand, because the justice system here is a bit unfair to his race. Now, by the end of part 1, his number one nemesis, Hubert Pellegrini, has decided to use one of his henchmen to abduct the son of Assane. It's much riskier this time. Lives are now involved. But before I continue with this review, I invite you guys, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do so by hitting that subscribe button. We do weekly reviews of movies and TV shows. And while you're at it, please give this video a like because it really helps the channel. So part 1, I would say the first 5 episodes are more setups. Then part 2, these are the payoffs to those setups. I would say that the storyline is much tighter now, and there's more hashed conflict, the internal conflict of Assane here. He wants to go back to his normal life, that is with his son and his ex-wife, but he can't do so because he needs to do that mission of taking down those people who are responsible for the downfall of his father. So in a character study level, it's all about Assane trying to manage his relationships, dealing with the consequences of living a double life. Omar Sy, as always, portrays this character with charm, warmth. That's all the things that you need for a likable character. He's the running engine of this series, and I forgot to mention this on my previous review, but his counterpart, the younger version of him in the flashbacks, I believe his name is Mamadou Haidara. He has the same amount of charm and likability. As for the heist, I would say part 1's advantage over part 2 is the heists in part 1 are more elaborate, more intricate, and veering novelty. But in here, part 2 is less complex, but that doesn't mean that less complex means less compelling. Part 2 here have higher stakes, and some of the setups of the heists here are done in part 1. So maybe you watched part 1 and you had some questions there, like why did Assane did those things in part 1? You get the payoff in part 2 now. The usual trope in this heist scenarios, when after a caper is being pulled off, you get to rewind the events, see things from a different perspective, so you get a full picture of all the things that Assane is actually up to. And there's even one episode here where I was just shaking my head for almost the entire episode because I do not agree to Assane's level of thinking, but by the end it kind of blows me away that of course Assane here has much larger plan. I would say the best heist of this show so far remains to be the pilot episode when he tries to steal that pearl or diamond necklace. I actually forgot, at the Louvre Museum. But in here, the third act of the final episode is excellently done for me. It's set on an orchestral music, the tension is high, and you just get blown away by this character because he managed to find a way every time he finds himself stuck in a situation. Granted, of course, that these heists are meticulously calculated, and these are the types of heists that multiple things can go wrong. So if you're a realist, this show is not for you. But you know, I've given up long time ago to think through, to sweat the small details, because that is not the best way to enjoy this show. And in terms of plot holes, I don't purposely look for any, but I didn't notice a plot hole that's so glaring, something like Now You See Me Too has done, so all is forgiven. Also, I would say the heists here for part 2 are much difficult for Assane here because his identity is now revealed to the police. He has to up his disguises. I remember there's one disguise in part 1 where he transformed himself to an old man, and it took me for almost a good minute before realizing that this is actually Assane. I was just dumbfounded at that scene. And in here, there's a disguise here that I really like. And those disguises, I believe, are, good, subtle injects of social commentary when it comes to racism. Part of the reason why Assane gets away with this is generally black people are just overlooked in this show. So they don't realize that this is actually the fugitive that they're looking for. So I guess I go back to the brilliant creative decision here of the showrunners to change the ethnicity of our protagonist here into black. So it's much integral to the story, and it's not doing inclusivity just for the sake of it. That is the same level of discrimination that his father received. So he's using that to his advantage. Also, what I do like about part 2 here is the supporting characters feel more integral to the show. They're more fleshed out. They're no longer plot devices, because that's what I thought of some of them, to most of them. The flashbacks per episodes, which mostly focus on the early years of Assane here in his formative budding years of being a thief. It kind of explores also the relationships that he has in the important persons in his life and how these relationships evolve in the present. There's one character here in part 1, which is Ben. We only get to see him in the few episodes, and I wish we get to learn more of him. He has a more important role here in part 2. You get to learn more of his friendship with Assane. They make a good dynamic duo, not on the level of Sherlock and Dr. Watson, but another likable duo for the show. Then another important character in the life of Assane here is Juliet, his former flame, which is actually the daughter of Hubert Pellegrini. I was not expecting that they are going to explore his relationship with her again, but this relationship goes to interesting places because it's such a complex one. You don't know if Assane is just playing her, but they seem to have this mutual level of understanding. So you have to find out what Assane is cooking up in here. And in terms of the main villain of the show, Hubert Pellegrini, I mentioned this in my previous review. I think that I was longing for a worthy arch nemesis, but I think Pellegrini here is a worthy adversary. I was just expecting for a Moriarty figure to Sherlock. That's not the case that we're gonna get here, because Pellegrini here is still a tough guy to beat, considering that he basically owns the police force and any journalist who goes in his way will be silenced. So Pellegrini here is the perfect face and perfect stand-in for corruption and greed and discrimination that you're just going to love to hate. Especially he's using his philanthropy as a front for all of his money laundering schemes. So you're definitely going to hate this character even more. We get a lot of dueling revenge ploys here between Pellegrini and Assane Diop, because Pellegrini has a lot of henchmen at his disposal. So overall, part 2, I would say that the narrative remains to be slick. There are moments where the tension kind of diffuses, but those are moments given to build up character development. I would say part 2 is much more personal than part 1, so that works in the story's favor. And yeah, you just got a great central performance here from Omar Sy, so you can never go wrong with that. The setting remains to be one of the highlights of the show. I think part of the reason why a lot of people watch this show, because they're just missing the travel, and the sight here of Paris is just pleasing to the eye. I can never remember the locations that are featured in part 2, but my personal favorite is when they went to these underground catacombs. I will give Lupin part 2 a score of 4 out of 5 stars. Now it's already announced that part 3 will be on the works, and my main concern slash worry here is that they might be running out of stories to tell, because by the end of part 2, the arc of Assane trying to avenge his father is pretty much done now. So I would hate if they're going to revisit that again in a different angle. But who knows, maybe they're cooking up something better here. So if you've seen this show, let me know what you think in the comment sections down below. Also, if you enjoyed watching this review, hit that like button and subscribe to us for weekly content. Thank you so much guys for watching. Until then, see you on the next one.